Hi everybody and welcome to another exciting edition of Boring JavaScript. I'm your host, the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith, and today we're taking a look at the Decorator Pattern. Now before we begin, let me make one thing perfectly clear. We will not be talking about the decorators that are going to be included with the next version of JavaScript. They're currently on stage 3, and when they get added, it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful thing. But we're not going to discuss that until it actually gets added to the JavaScript language. Today, we're going to be talking about the decorator pattern. So what is the decorator pattern? Well, it simply just decorates a particular object without forcing that object to extend another object. For example, suppose you had an invoice and you needed to send this invoice in different formats to different companies. And all you really had to do was just change the header and the footer of this particular invoice. So for company 1, you may send one particular header and footer, and for company number 2, you may send another header and a footer. Now, of course, you could just do a couple of if-then-else statements, if this header, then this, and all that. But an easier way of doing that is to do a decorator model. And what a decorator model will allow you to do is to specify the invoice itself and then say, hey, just add header 1 or add header 2. And your code will go in there and decorate that particular invoice in order to add the header, either 1 or 2, or add the footer, either 1 or 2. And all you had to do was just specify which header and which footer you wanted to do. The details of the invoice itself has not changed. You have not needed to extend a particular class or anything like that. So you're using your headers and your footers to decorate your invoice details. And that's what a decorator pattern is all about. Very easy to implement within JavaScript. You want to see how it works? Let's get started. Okay, let's take a look at the invoices from the intro and see how we can use the decorator pattern to get what we want. So I have a very simple little invoice here that I've created, and it's got a method called print invoice that prints out the invoice. And let me show you what that looks like. There it is, that's it. And I'm not worried about numbers or anything like that. I just want to kind of show you that I am printing out the details of an invoice. So that's my print invoice method. So what does this look like when we run it? Let's go over to Node, and let's type in Node invoice. And there we are. Wow, what a shocker. So let's now take a look at a sample decorator pattern to show you how it will decorate this particular invoice to be able to print out headers and footers. And through the magic of television, we have a header. So now, notice the code I've changed here. Basically, I've added one more line here in line number 5. Yeah, I added a second one here for the invoice header. I'm not worried about that. So I've got a new line here saying new invoice header, and notice it is passing as an argument my original invoice, and that's going to be very important. So let's take a look at the invoice header itself. Now the invoice header, first of all, extends from invoice decorator base. So let's flip over really quick and take a look at that. Invoice decorator base is the base structure I have for all of my decorators, because all the decorators basically do the exact same thing. They consume a component and then they overwrite, or they call again the method that we're calling in the original object to be able to do whatever we have to do. In our case, print invoice. So invoice decorator base is very, very simple. It passes a component within the constructor, and that's going to be very, very important, as we'll see here in just a moment. We save it off, we do a little getter function so we can get it, and then we have our print invoice method. Now, there is no print invoice method really for the decorator base class, and the reason is that it does nothing. Its entire job is to declare it, saying, hey, you need to probably define print invoice. It's going to be up to the headers and the footers and anything else that we use for the decorators to define that print invoice. So now let's go over to the invoice header. So it extended the invoice decorator base. So of course I'm doing a super component here. I'm passing the component in, and that gets saved with the super on for the invoice decorator base. Here's my print invoice. Headers belong above the details, so notice what I've done here is I'm printing out, first of all, the header 1, then I got to print out the details. Well, where are my details? The details are stored within the component itself, so I'm calling this .component.print invoice. So this basically, so instead of, I'm not going to call print invoice, but I'm going to directly target the print invoice method on the component that gets passed to this class here. To this decorator, and that's extraordinarily important. So again, header gets printed out first, then the print invoice comes second. So if we now go back to our invoice, that's why I'm passing the component that we created in line 4 here in line 5. as long as I pass that component, it's going to basically wrap that print invoice method around the print invoice method within my particular invoice, and then it can do whatever it wants to do. Notice back over here, I haven't changed the invoice base whatsoever. I'm directly calling it, but I haven't changed it. So by using this particular pattern here, I can add as much as I absolutely want. I hit the wrong thing here. I can add absolutely as much as I want to the, in this case, the print invoice, without ever having to change the original print invoice of the base itself. So within the invoice header, again, we print out the header, we do the print invoice. So when we come to here, my invoice is passed over to invoice header. So when we do the print invoice, it's going to print the header. Then it's going to print the my invoice details. At least that's what it should do. So let's flip back over to Node. Let's clear off our screen. And let's type in Node. Let's spell it right first. Type in Node invoice. And sure enough, there we go. Header 1, then invoice details. So again, we haven't changed the invoice details whatsoever. The invoice has stayed the same, but we've now, by using the same method, we have decorated it by adding a header at the top. Well, can we do the same thing with the footer? Sure we can. Let's take a look at some of that code. And through the magic of television, there it is. That's it. That's all we've done now. We save off our invoice as the invoice header. So we're now coming in as a new invoice header. We're passing that into invoice footer. So invoice footer is going to invoice footer, let's take a look at that, is going to first of all call this component print invoice. So what's it going to do? This component print invoice is going to be my invoice, which was created right here on line 6. That's going to be the invoice header. So it's going to go to the print invoice header. So the first thing it's going to do is say, hey, I'm going to print header 1. Then it's going to go to the component print invoice. Well, what was that? Well, back over here, the original component for the header was my original invoice. So then it's going to go to the invoice base and say, I'm going to print out the details. It's going to return from that. So then it's going to return from this. Once it returns from all of this, it's going to get to here and then print out the footer. So now we've decorated it even again. Let's take a look to make sure it works. Let's clear off our screen, type in Node invoice. Yep, there you are. Header, invoice details, footer 1. So how easy is it to change to another header? Well, let's just take a quick look at that. I got a second header defined in a file called header 2. So I'm going to go invoice header 2, footer 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. That's it. Don't have to change anything else. Let's flip over to Node. Let's clear off the screen, type in Node invoice, and there's my header 2, invoice details, and footer 2. Can we decorate more than that? Yeah, sure, why not? How about 2 headers up in there? So let's import invoice header and invoice header 2. So let's take off the 2 there, let's take off the 2 here. We got the header 2 right here. Let's start with the header 1, or we can put it at the very end. Whoops. Let's just put it after header 2. Let's just see what happens there. So now we've got 2 different headers and a footer. The big thing here is that my base is always defined first. So I'm taking the base, I'm decorating it with the header number 2, then decorating with another header, and then decorating with a footer 2. Let's see how that works. Let's go to Node, let's clear off the screen, Node invoice, and there it is, header 1, header 2, header 3. So what happened? Why? I thought I was going to do 2, then 1. Remember, everything is kind of reversed. So if we take a look at the code, remember the last thing, when we do the print invoice, is going to go backwards order. Actually, the first thing it's going to do is do footer 2. It says, okay, we're going to actually now do header. So header 1 was done first, then header 2. So that's why it came out as header 1, then header 2. Aha, so I got you on that one. So as you can tell there, again, our invoice itself has not changed. The only thing that has changed is that we're passing it to other routines that call the same print invoice to be able to decorate the print, use the print invoice to decorate the original base. And I can do this all day long with headers, footers, anything I want. Now, this is a very simple example of invoices. What about within system programming? Well, here's a contrived example that we'll show you here next about how to do it with passwords. That's next. So let's take a look at an example of how we can validate passwords using the decorator pattern. Now, Honestly, I wouldn't really suggest doing it this way. This is just something I suddenly came up with that, hey, we could actually use a decorator pattern with it. Best type of pattern? Maybe, maybe not. Depends upon your application. Explore what you can do with other types of patterns before you actually use this one, but this is just the way you can do it. So as you can tell here is that we're creating our new password, and this password file happens to be just very simple. I'm just doing a valid password, but the key here is we're going to have a routine called isValid, and this isValid is going to be able to tell us whether our password is valid or not. And right now it just says, hey, is the length of valid, which is an array of 0. If it is, hey, we're valid. If it's not, then we got some errors in it. So all we're doing here now is that we're passing, just like we did with the invoices, we're passing my password to a class called minimum characters, which will check for the minimum number of characters, which gets passed to a class called maximum characters, which will check for the maximum number of characters, which will get passed to include uppercase, which check to make sure it has at least one uppercase character, which will get passed to include special character, which will basically say, hey, do you have at least one special character, which gets passed to include number, which will make sure it includes at least one number, which finally gets passed to include lowercase, which will check to make sure that it has at least one lowercase. And then we just call isValid, and if it's valid, we got a valid password. Otherwise, we have an invalid password. So this is how it works. We go over here, we type in node, validate password. And yep, I have a valid password because this password I got right here meets all the different criteria. So let's take a look at the decorator patterns, and you'll see this looks almost exactly the same as the invoice ones. The base, this is our base itself, and it just includes the value and the valid, and it returns an isValid method. I mean, that's it. There's really nothing more to it because all the business logic is included within the decorators that expand this. So let's just take a look at two of the decorators. First one I want to take a look at is include uppercase, and the include lowercase and include special characters works the exact same way. We are importing a thing called password settings from settings.passwords, which I'll explain just here in just a minute. That if we do want to include or do an uppercase check, we just simply do a check. And if we do a check, we do a valid push for, we push into the valid array that we have an error. And that's it. We don't have to do anything else. Minimum characters, same type of deal here. If we're doing the minimum characters, if our length of our value is less than the minimum characters, then we print out a little message into the valid push. So each one of these will automatically push into the valid array if it has a particular error, and that includes all of these errors, which is include lowercase, include number, include special character, include uppercase, maximum characters, and minimum characters. So all of those will get executed and give us a final isValid, which isValid is defined here inside valid password base. I don't have to define it in all the rest of them. I just have to define it here. And it's just going to check to see if valid length is equal to 0. If it is, we're valid. If it's not, it's not. Now, one thing I did add in all of these is, let's just include uppercase, is I have something called password settings that says, do we include the uppercase or not? This is a special JavaScript file that has all the different settings that we're checking for. How many minimum characters? 8. What's the maximum characters? 20. We're checking for special characters, special for number, uppercase, and lowercase. So if you set all this up, and let's say 6 months down the road, they want to say, we want people to have a maximum character of 30, all you have to do is come in here and change that number to 30, and everything automatically changes. You don't have to go through any of your other code to change it. You just automatically change it just by changing it here. Or if you want to say, well, numbers are not exactly needed anymore, you can change that to false, and it won't check numbers. It will just go ahead and automatically it'll still do the check. It'll still do the new class, but it'll just pretty much skip in the construction part. It'll just skip the check that you are, for the valid. And that's pretty much it. As you can tell here, these run basically the exact same way as our invoice does, so that once it gets through all of this, our passwords will check. So let's give it a blank password. Let's save it. Let's flip over to node. Let's flip over to node. There we go. Go node validate password. Yep, invalid password. Must be a minimum of 8 characters, at least one uppercase character, at least one of those characters, at least one number, and at least one lowercase character. Okay, well, all right. So let's see. Let's do an uppercase character. And let's see if that changes. Yeah, believe me, I changed it. I put an uppercase character inside there. Let's validate password again. Yep, notice that the at least one uppercase character error message now does not show up down here. So if we go back to our code and let's put a special character inside there, and let's see, one lowercase character, one number character, and at least 8 characters. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's save it. Let's flip back over to Node. Let's just clear the screen from here. We have a valid password. What? But there's one more check, remember? Maximum number of characters, 20. So, la. Let's save it. Let's flip over to Node. Node validate password. Yep, no more than 20 characters allowed. So that is a way, and I will admit it's a contrived way, but that is a way that you can use the decorator pattern to do a very quick and very easy validation check on passwords. And that's all there is to using the decorator pattern. I hope you enjoyed our video. Hope I didn't bore you to death. Please make sure you click on the like button below and click on the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel. Also, you can see all of our videos at www.boringjavascript.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later.